So I want you to just imagine for a second a Fortune 500 CEO walking up to a microphone at this massive global summit.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. And they step up to the podium, they take their gold-plated, meticulously crafted resume, and they toss it casually into the nearest trash can.
Wow. Just right in the garbage.
Yeah. And then they introduce themselves to the world as an unpaid intern. I mean, it sounds completely absurd, right? It's completely counter to human nature because we spend our entire lives, building up our credentials, our titles, our little kingdoms of influence. But 2,000 years ago, in the opening line of a letter that would literally change the course of human history, a man named Paul did exactly that.
He really did.
Yeah.
And welcome to the deep dive, by the way. I'm so excited to get into this today.
Yes, welcome. I'm your host, and I'm here with our resident expert to really unpack this because it's fascinating. What is our mission for today's deep dive?
Well, we are looking at one of the most radical, subversive introductions ever written, Romans 1.1. And what we're doing today is unpacking the sheer weight of that single sentence.
Yeah, there's a lot packed into that one line.
There really is.
Oh.
We are going to deconstruct how Paul completely flipped the ancient cultural script on identity, what it meant to embrace this deeply misunderstood title of a bondservant, and most importantly for you listening, how this ancient theological framework gives us a stunningly practical blueprint for redefining who we are today.
Right, because to really feel the impact of this mic drop from Paul, we have to kind of teleport back to the first century.
We do. We have to understand how much a name actually weighed back then.
Exactly, because today, if you meet a stranger, you might drop your job title or where you went to college. But in ancient Israel, your family tree wasn't just some fun trivia you looked up on an ancestry website.
No, not at all.
It was like your entire social security number, your bank account, and your community standing all rolled into one.
Yeah, without your lineage, you were essentially a ghost in the societal machine. I mean, in ancient Jewish culture, your ancestry dictated literally everything.
Like what kind of things?
Well, your land rights, your marriage prospects, and your specific divinely ordained responsibilities within the community. These genealogical records were guarded with this intense, almost obsessive care.
So you couldn't just reinvent yourself.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah.
You did not have a modern, individualized identity apart from your family. You were a piece of this larger, ancient puzzle, and your last name determined exactly where you fit.
Like, take the tribe of Levi as a prime example. If you were born a Levite, you didn't go to a career counselor to figure out your passion in life.
Right. There were no personality tests.
Yeah. Your path was set from the moment you took your first breath. You were inextricably linked to the service of God's house. You were set apart for the immense sacred responsibilities of maintaining the tabernacle and, later on, the temple.
And that wasn't based on merit either.
No, not because of your personal skills or your charismatic leadership, but simply because of your bloodline.
Exactly. And there is also the historical account of Nadab and Abihu.
Oh, right, them.
Yeah, they are almost exclusively known by their relational identifier, the sons of Aaron. Their entire historical footprint, their legacy, the incredibly sacred service they performed, it was all understood entirely through the lens of their father's legacy.
Wow.
Your father, your tribe, your ancestral patriarch, that was your resume. That was literally the only way the community knew how to interact with you.
Which brings us to the sheer shock value of Paul's introduction in his letter to the Romans. Because Paul had what we would consider today to be an untouchable platinum tier cultural resume.
Oh, his resume was stacked.
Seriously stacked. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees, meaning he was part of the intellectual and religious elite. He was educated under Gamaliel, which, for you listening, is essentially the first century equivalent of having a Supreme Court justice as your personal one-on-one mentor.
Right, it doesn't get higher than that.
And on top of all that Jewish prestige, he held the ultimate secular trump card, right? He was a Roman citizen.
Yeah, and that Roman citizenship, I mean, we really cannot overstate how huge that was.
Tell us why that mattered so much.
Well, in a vast empire populated largely by subjects and slaves, being a citizen meant you possessed profound legal protections. You were exempt from certain horrific forms of punishment, like crucifixion.
Wow, so literal life or death privileges.
Exactly. You had the right to a fair trial and the right to appeal directly to Caesar. It placed you in a social stratosphere that the vast majority of the people you walk past on the street could only ever dream of. It was this invisible, impenetrable shield of privilege.
So he has this immense religious pedigree, this elite education, and this imperial shield. And yet, when he sits down to write to the Romans, a community located in the very beating heart of this massive empire, he completely ignores his earthly father's name.
He just leaves it out.
He bypasses his Ivy League level education. He leaves his Roman passport entirely out of the conversation. Instead, he introduces himself purely through his relationship with Jesus Christ, declaring himself a bondservant.
Yeah, he deliberately strips himself of every piece of worldly armor. He doesn't present himself as an intellectual heavyweight or a political insider or, even a co-pilot with Christ.
Right.
He chooses a title that implies absolute, total submission. He is signaling to the most power-obsessed city on earth that he belongs entirely to someone else, and that his life is fully available for his master's purposes, regardless of the cost.
Wait, let's look at the mechanics of this, though. Because why would anyone do that? We are talking about a guy who had the world on a string.
It's a fair question.
What is the strategic advantage of humbling yourself to the level of a servant when you have the credentials to literally command a room?
Oh, it wasn't about strategy in the political sense. Paul was pointing to a new reality that completely short-circuits human power structures. He recognized that any identity built on human credentials is fundamentally fragile.
That makes sense.
But to truly grasp why he considered this a massive upgrade rather than a downgrade, we have to look closely at the cultural and legal mechanism behind that specific word, bondservant.
Because there is a massive historical difference between a slave and a bondservant. Right.
A huge difference.
When we hear the word servant or slave, we immediately think of horrific coercion, fear, forced labor. But Paul is tapping into a very specific ancient mechanism here.
Right. In the ancient legal codes, particularly in ancient Israelite law, a standard slave might serve out of necessity, paying off a debt, driven by the threat of punishment. The dynamic is rooted entirely in force.
Yeah, a terrible situation.
But a bondservant was something remarkably different. If a servant reached the end of their required time of service, which was usually 7 years, and they realized they profoundly loved their master and they loved the household, they could make a radical choice.
They could choose to stay.
Exactly. They could voluntarily choose to stay for life.
And the mechanism for this is just fascinating. They would literally go to the doorpost of the master's house and have their ear pierced with an awl.
Right. A permanent physical marker.
Yeah, a permanent marker of a willing, lifelong attachment. The motivation wasn't fear of the outside world. It was love, trust, and profound gratitude for the master.
And that changes the entire psychological and spiritual landscape of Paul's introduction.
Totally shifts it.
He isn't serving Jesus Christ because he is terrified of divine lightning bolts. His submission is the result of a completely transformed heart. He is bound to Christ by an overwhelming affection and a deep realization of his own dependence.
You know, I try to picture this in a way that makes sense for our daily lives. Like for you listening, think about you driving down the highway.
Okay, driving.
There is a massive difference between doing the speed limit because you suddenly spot a police cruiser hiding in the median versus driving carefully because your newborn baby is sleeping in the car seat right behind you.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. From the outside, the action looks identical. You are going exactly 65 miles an hour. But the internal mechanism driving that action couldn't be more different. One is forced compliance, driven by the fear of a penalty. The other is a willing, joyful caution, driven by a deep, transformed affection.
That captures the essence of the bondservant perfectly. The police cruiser represents the religious legalism Paul left behind, while the loved one in the backseat represents his new internal motivation.
I love that.
And this transformed heart didn't just give him a warm, fuzzy feeling. It actually manifested in 3 concrete, unshakable pillars of his new identity.
And those are?
Intense affection, radical trust, and unyielding support.
Okay, let's explore how that actually played out, because it is incredibly easy to claim you are serving out of deep affection when the sun is shining, your bank account is full, and everybody likes you.
Oh, for sure. It's easy when things are good.
But Paul's life was a masterclass in suffering. I mean, we are talking about multiple shipwrecks, beatings, starvation, and sitting in dark, damp Roman dungeons.
Which is exactly why that first pillar affection is so critical. It was his profound love for Christ that acted as the psychological anchor in those horrific circumstances.
Because otherwise he would have just quit.
Exactly. He endured systemic rejection, intense physical pain, and constant danger, without ever complaining that the assignment was unfair. His obedience didn't dry up when the circumstances got brutal, because his obedience flowed directly from his passion, not his comfort.
Wow. And that affection, naturally fuels the second pillar, which is trust.
Right.
Paul deliberately placed his entire trust in Christ alone, not in his wealthy friends, not in his political connections, not in the local magistrates, and certainly not in the Roman emperor. He completely detached his sense of security from human institutions.
Because he recognized a fundamental truth about human nature and human systems.
Yeah.
They are inherently volatile.
Very true.
Governments rewrite their laws. Friends get scared and walk away. Organizations run out of funding. If your core identity and your trust are tied to those things, you will be utterly destroyed when they inevitably crack.
Yeah, it's just a house of cards.
But Christ, however, provides an unchanging foundation across every generation and every conceivable circumstance.
Wait, hold on. Let's look at this practically for a second. Because Paul claims he trusts Christ completely, but look at the actual results. He ends up beaten within an inch of his life, he is constantly hunted, and he ultimately winds up in chains.
Yes, he does.
So from the outside looking in, throwing away your Roman passport to trust an invisible God looks like a massive strategic failure. If this ultimate trust still lands you in a dungeon, how is it practically better than just leveraging your social status to stay safe and comfortable?
Well, it forces us to define what better actually means and what true security really looks like.
Okay, break that down for us.
Earthly authorities can protect your physical body for a time provided you play by their rules and stay in their favor. But they cannot protect your soul, your purpose, or your inner peace.
That's a huge distinction.
Paul understood that physical safety is temporary, but the internal strength and eternal presence provided by Christ transcend physical chains. It is a security that literally cannot be confiscated by a Roman guard or legislated away by an emperor.
That is so powerful. And that brings us right to the third pillar, support. Because this trust isn't like a magical, invisible force field that repels rocks and swords.
No, definitely not.
Serving Jesus didn't mean Paul was immune to trauma. It meant he was supported through it.
Right. He never bought into the illusion that being a bondservant guaranteed a pain-free existence. The promise wasn't the absence of the storm, it was the presence of the master within the storm.
There is a remarkably poignant historical moment toward the end of Paul's life that highlights this perfectly. He was on trial, facing immense danger, and he writes that at his first defense, absolutely no one came to his side.
Yeah, that part is heartbreaking.
Every single person he knew had abandoned him out of fear. But in that moment of profound, crushing isolation, he testified that the Lord stood right beside him and infused him with the strength to keep speaking.
When all external support evaporated, the internal spiritual support sustained him. He wasn't relying on the applause or the physical presence of other people to validate his calling. He was relying on the master who had claimed him.
So how does this ancient radical framework translate to you, the person listening to this right now?
Yeah.
I mean, you are probably not a first century Pharisee, and you probably don't have a Roman citizenship card in your wallet.
Probably not.
But we live in a world that is just as obsessed with labels, status, and self-promotion as ancient Rome was.
Oh, completely. And the application here is actually startlingly direct. It begins with a ruthless evaluation of the labels you use to define yourself.
Yeah, think back to that.
Think back to that opening scenario about introducing yourself at a party. You might lead with your job title as a senior director, or your degree from a prestigious university, the neighborhood you live in, maybe the accomplishments of your children.
We use those labels as a kind of social armor to prove we matter. But this framework argues that while those things might accurately describe parts of your current temporary earthly life, they are completely insufficient to bear the weight of your deepest identity.
They will always let you down eventually.
Exactly. If you belong to Christ, your ultimate identity is found entirely in that relationship. You are called to view yourself exactly the way Paul did, as a bondservant.
And stepping into that identity requires a profound, willing surrender, which, let's be honest, in our modern, hyper-individualistic culture, the idea of surrendering autonomy is deeply offensive to a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely.
We are taught that the highest good is absolute personal freedom, the ability to pursue whatever desires we have without answering to anyone. But embracing the identity of a bondservant means yielding your plans, your ambitions, your finances, and your future to the Lord's direction.
But remember the mechanism of the ear piercing at the doorpost we talked about. This is not a joyless, teeth-gritting submission to a cosmic tyrant.
Right. It's out of love.
It is a loving surrender to a Savior who knows you intimately, loves you relentlessly, and leads you perfectly. It is willingly handing over the steering wheel of your life because you trust the person in the driver's seat far more then you trust your own navigation skills.
I love that. And to actually live this out, to build this blueprint into your Tuesday morning commute or your Friday afternoon staff meeting, you have to integrate those three pillars into your daily rhythm.
Okay, let's review those. How do we do that?
First, you cultivate that affection. You seek to love and obey Christ above your career ambitions or your desire for social approval, driven by passion rather than religious guilt.
Second, you practice radical trust. You consciously decide to stop placing your ultimate hope in things that can fail. You stop panicking every time the stock market dips, or a political election doesn't go your way, or a relationship gets rocky. You anchor your trust in a foundation that outlasts human volatility.
And third, you lean heavily on that promised support. You move forward with the quiet, unshakable confidence that Christ stands with you in every boardroom, in every hospital waiting room, and through every personal crisis.
Even if everyone else abandons you.
Exactly. Even if the rest of the world walks away, you are never operating in isolation.
Wow. We have covered incredible ground today. We started by looking at ancient Israelite genealogies, where a person's worth was entirely locked into their family tree.
Lineage was everything.
We watched Paul take a massive, privileged cultural resume and completely dismantle it, embracing the deeply humble, fiercely devoted title of a bondservant in Romans 1.1. We saw how he redefined service, moving it from a place of fear and coercion to a place of profound affection, radical trust, and unyielding support.
It really is a complete paradigm shift.
It is, and the blueprint left behind is clear. Your truest, most indestructible identity isn't found in what the world calls you or what you achieve, but in who you belong to.
It changes how you view every interaction and every challenge. And, to close out our deep dive today, there's a lingering, somewhat uncomfortable question to wrestle with on your own time.
Oh, I like a challenge. What is it?
If a sudden, unexpected life event stripped away your job title, your social standing, your financial security, and all of your earthly accomplishments by tomorrow morning, if all your go-to labels vanished overnight, would your core identity remain intact? Or would you realize you've been relying on the fragile labels of the world rather than the unshakable title of a bondservant?
That is heavy. The next time you find yourself at a neighborhood barbecue or a networking event and someone asks you to introduce yourself, you might just find yourself thinking very differently about the answer.